As far as Dynamite on Wednesday, the big story going into the show was really, which seems to be a recurring, a recurring case at this point with Dynamite as far as all the stories kind of happening before the show even goes on the air. This one revolving around Punk and the Elite. Now, the latest update is that Punk is very likely on his way out of the company. They're looking to do a buyout of his contract, not because Punk wants to leave. I'm not sure he would be too keen on apologizing for his actions anyway from about a month ago at Brawl Out, as they call it. But still, we'll see what happens from here. I'm not 100% convinced he's gone until he's gone. It's one of those seeing is believing sort of things. But with this, it seems like he is as good as gone from the company, per reports that, Jericho had some pretty stern things to say to Punk after the Brawl Out thing happened last month. Just the nature of what went down in the fight itself in the locker room, what he said during the media scrum. It's hard to imagine at this point, after everything we've seen and heard about the situation from all sides. And, they're not speaking out about it, but, legally they can't currently. But just from what we know and what's been reported, it sure does seem like, based on the locker room morale towards Punk currently, that he is not going to be welcomed back with open arms. So even if Tony Khan weren't to fire him, like with Jeff Hardy, for example, Jeff Hardy, I assume, will be back at some point. He's currently suspended for being involved in yet another fucking DUI over the summer. It doesn't sound like he, has heat for when he comes back, which, for what he did was pretty fucking dumb. This was a different story. It just doesn't sound like there's a situation here where they can hold on to Punk and it's going to end well for the locker room and wanting him back. So he probably is as good as gone from AEW. As far as the Elite go, they did air a vignette. Again, this was one of the more interesting aspects of the show from Wednesday. They aired a vignette indicating that the Elite will be back soon. And it wasn't like a hype package. It was more so showing shots and video clips of them starting AEW and stuff like that. And then they would be erased from each shot. So like when they showed the Bucks and Omega with their titles from, about a year ago or whatever, they were like being slowly faded out, along with the Elite part of the AEW logo. So I don't know what that means for their return as far as what they do when they come back. All we know is that they're on their way back. They will be back at some point soon. Maybe they'll acknowledge this sort of stuff and the Elite is done. Maybe Adam Page gets involved again. He's not doing much right now. He got fucking concussed last week, so maybe that's where this is headed. The Elite versus Undisputed Elite storyline is dead in the water. Cole's hurt. Kyle O'Reilly's hurt. Bobby Fish is gone. So, that whole feud unfortunately fell apart, and we're not going to get a proper conclusion to that, which sucks. I've seen people say, and I read reports that they did sign the Kingdom, Matt Taven, Mike Bennett, two great tag team guys, and two guys that have had a lot of success in recent years in Ring of Honor and recently in Impact as well. They could be AEW bound. They could be signing full-time deals if they haven't already. So, as I've seen other people say, I've been thinking about this for a while, it would be very easy if Cole gets cleared at some point and Kyle O'Reilly's still out, for Cole to enlist the Kingdom into kind of reunite the Kingdom from Ring of Honor. Now, Matt Hardy was a part of the faction as well. I don't know if they want Matt Hardy in another heel faction. He was just in one with the AHFO, whatever the fuck that shit was, and that was terrible. So, maybe not. But just Taven, Bennett, and Cole would be interesting enough, and they worked great together in Ring of Honor years ago, so I would be perfectly fine with that. But back to my original point, which I don't remember what it was. As far as the Elite goes, maybe they'll do something with that, whatever. As far as Punk goes and his future going forward, as I mentioned, it seems like he's as good as gone from AEW. Based on reports from Fightful Select, Meltzer, PW Insider, they're looking to buy out his contract, pay him for what the rest of his contract was whenever it was scheduled to be up, 2 or 3 years from now, I'm not sure, and then just be done with them and move on. And I had seen, as other people have speculated, that it would have a non-compete included, which would indicate that they're well aware that WWE may try to get a piece of Punk and want him back in WWE at some point. Is it possible? Honestly, stranger things have happened. Considering this is the same calendar year where Cody Rhodes went from a company he started in AEW back to WWE within a matter of months, anything is possible. Now, CM Punk has far more animosity towards his former employer than Cody Rhodes ever did when he went from AEW to WWE. There's a lot more baggage there with Punk, and that's just one thing. But would Punk be willing to work through that to have one last run in WWE? It's possible. Honestly, at this point, do I see it happening? Yes or no? The answer is probably no. Could it happen? Absolutely. But not just from the fact that Punk would have to get over his own personal issues with WWE, which there is quite a bit of. He still talks shit about them in interviews ever pretty much since he came back to AEW. He's not a fan of the product. He doesn't think Triple H taking over makes much of a difference, which it definitely has, but whatever. I can't see him immediately going back. I know Punk has said some shit and whatever, or Cody Rhodes said some shit. That was more so because he, loved Triple H. He's mentioned this before, that he talked a lot of trash with WWE, and some of it he didn't mean. He just wanted to rile people up. Punk, it seems like he has actual bad blood of the company. Would he go back to WWE? It's very possible. I just don't see it happening. Not only given his own personal history and established issues that he has with WWE, but also because they may not even want him. They may not even view him as being worth the headache, worth the hassle of bringing him back. Especially if the talent in AEW don't want him back. I can't imagine the locker room in WWE, for all the shit that he said about them in recent years, specifically in the last year since he's been in AEW, would go over all too well in WWE. So, I could always see a Hall of Fame induction down the road for Punk. I've always said that. I've always said he will be back in some form or fashion, more likely than not in a non-wrestling role. It seems like he is done in AEW. It's going to be hard to, just based on the talent's own feelings towards him, to kind of heal those wounds and whatnot, and he may not even want to. I can't see him going around to everyone and apologizing for what he did if he didn't feel sorry about doing it, as far as what he said before the brawl even happened and putting a black eye on the company. But yeah, as far as the WWE run goes, it's just hard to imagine that's where they're going to be going with this, as far as him getting over his issues with the company and then wanting him back. He would be a big name that they can use for sure. But just coming off all the bad publicity that the AEW stuff did, Cody Rhodes was never involved in anything like that in AEW. It seemed like he was a locker room leader, and them getting him was a big coup for WWE because he helped start AEW. Punk would be a big coup for them as well, but the difference there is that he's coming off a very awful ending to his AEW run. We probably have very likely seen the last of Punk in a wrestling ring as far as, in-ring action goes. He can come back and do something else as a commentator, be in the Hall of Fame, as I mentioned, but as far as him wrestling again, that was probably his last run. And he cut it short because of his own, idiotic actions at All Out and everything else that's happened with him since then, as far as, what he said during the media scrum and everything else coming out about, the brawl itself and allegations and shit and shit like that. So it's hard to see that this can be ending up being a positive for anyone that's a fan of Punk as far as seeing him compete again. But it seems like those days are over, and he's probably going back to doing commentary for UFC or whatever the fuck he was doing previously. So kind of a disappointing ending to that saga as far as his AEW run goes, because he came back and had an awesome first run in AEW, and then it had to end the way that it did, which is super disappointing.